Have you ever stopped to think about how a country's history isn't just in books? It's literally written on the land itself. You can see it in the way cities are laid out, in the quality of the soil, even in the way rivers flow. Today, we're diving into South Africa, a place where the incredible story of division and democracy has physically shaped the environment. And that brings us to the big question we're tackling in this explainer. How does a country's past actually redraw its map and poison its rivers? We're going to trace the lines connecting political decisions made over a century ago to the very real environmental problems people are facing today. All right, let's get into it. Now, you might think this story starts with the official policy of apartheid, but actually, we have to go back even further. It all begins with the very first laws that started to separate people by, you guessed it, separating the land they were allowed to live on. So, first things first, let's get on the same page about what we mean by segregation. This wasn't something that just sort of happened. No, this was a systematic, totally deliberate process of separating people, backed up by the full force of the law. This idea is the foundation for everything, and I mean everything that comes next. And just look at how early these seeds were planted. Way back in 1894, the Glenn Gray Act starts to limit land ownership. Then you get the big one, the 1913 Land Act. And by 1923, you have laws controlling where Black people could even go in the cities. These weren't just random rules. They were the architectural blueprints for building a divided nation. 7%. Just let that number sink in for a minute. That's the total amount of land that the 1913 Land Act set aside for the huge Black majority. So you see, this law wasn't just about taking land. It was about completely blowing up a way of life, forcing millions of people into working for wages on farms and in mines. So we have this foundation of segregation. Now we're going to see how it was built upon. That early system was about to be turned into something far more rigid, all-encompassing, and, frankly, brutal. A new word was about to enter the world's vocabulary: apartheid. And here it is, the turning point. 1948. The National Party wins an election, not on some complicated economic plan, but on a single, powerful promise: apartheid. It literally means apartness. What used to be a mix of custom and law was now the official central mission of the entire government. So how'd they do it? How do you enforce apartness? Well, they built it on these pillars. The Population Registration Act put a racial label on every single person. The Group Areas Act told you exactly where you could live and, more importantly, where you couldn't. And the Bantu Education Act, well, that was designed from the ground up to give Black children a worse education, preparing them only for a life of cheap labor. Okay, now we're making a really important turn here. We've seen the politics and the history, but how did all these laws leave actual physical scars on the land itself? How does a government policy end up becoming an environmental disaster? Let's ask it this way, just to make the connection super clear. What does a political policy like the Group Areas Act from 1950 have to do with the quality of the air someone breathes today or the water they drink? The answer, as you're about to see, is pretty much everything. And look at this. You can draw a straight line from cause to effect. The Group Areas Act forcing people into tiny designated areas, that leads directly to the overcrowded informal settlements we see today. The Bantustan policy, which pushed millions onto small, poor-quality bits of land, you get overgrazing and massive soil erosion. And guess where they decided to put the polluting factories and mines? Yep, right next to the townships. It's not a coincidence, it's a blueprint. You can see this legacy so clearly in the world of farming. It's like two different planets. On one side, you've got massive commercial farms running for profit on the best land in the country. And on the other, small-scale subsistence farming, just to feed a family, often on poor, marginal land with almost no resources. That's a direct result of who got the land and who didn't. And you know what? This whole thing has a name. It's called spatial inequality. It's the reason why some neighborhoods have beautiful parks, reliable electricity, and clean running water, while others, sometimes just a mile away, have none of that. It's the ghost of the Group Areas Act, and you can still see it on pretty much any city map in South Africa. So, fast forward, apartheid officially ends. The world cheers for this new rainbow nation. But that leads to a really tough question. Can you just flip a switch and erase a century of inequality that's been physically carved into the landscape? And the journey to get there was absolutely heroic. You have the Soweto uprising in '76 that shocks the world. Then in 1990, Nelson Mandela walks out of prison after 27 long years. And finally, 1994, millions of South Africans of all races lining up to vote for the very first time. It was just this incredible, powerful moment of hope. But after the parties and the celebration, the really hard work started. And the brand new democracy inherited that old divided map. The issues you see here, painfully slow land reform, shortages of basic services, overcrowding, and that deep spatial inequality we keep talking about, these are still the daily challenges. The shadow of the past is very, very long. So that brings us right up to today. How does a country even begin to tackle all these problems that are so tangled together? How do you fight for social justice and environmental health at the exact same time? Well, the game plan really comes down to this big idea: sustainable development. It might sound a bit academic, but the idea is actually pretty simple. It just means we've got to fix the problems we have right now: poverty, inequality, access to clean water, but we have to do it in a way that doesn't completely mess up the world for our kids and grandkids. Now here's where it gets even more complicated. You throw climate change into this already difficult mix. Climate change is what you call a threat multiplier. The impacts you see here, droughts, floods, failing crops, they don't hit everyone equally. They hit the most vulnerable communities the hardest. And yep, those are often the very same communities living on that marginal land because of the policies of the past. So the way forward really has two parts. First, you have mitigation. That's about attacking the root cause of the problem, shifting to clean energy like solar and wind. But then you also need adaptation. That's about dealing with the fact that the climate is already changing. So you do things like harvesting rainwater to deal with droughts and building better barriers to protect against floods. And maybe this incredible quote from Nelson Mandela just sums it all up. Real freedom isn't just about breaking your own chains. It's about building a society and an environment where everyone else has the freedom to truly thrive. It connects that historic fight for political rights directly to today's fight for environmental justice. Which leaves us right here, with one final massive question to think about. In a place like South Africa, where the past is literally etched into the present-day geography, can you actually build a green, sustainable future if you haven't first healed the deep social and economic wounds of the past? That, right there, is the central challenge. And it's something we're thinking about long after this is over.